Disclaimer: this episode may contain graphic descriptions of crime. Listeners' discretion is advised for those under the age of 18 and for individuals who may be sensitive to graphic details. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Krime KE podcast. My good name is Ajuma and I am a human rights journalist from Kenya. This week, we get into the murder of Denzel Omondi. This story has been heavily reported to have resulted from the Occupy Parliament protests from June 25th, 2024, and with good reason because the disappearance and murder of Denzel follows the same script as the abductions that happened at that time. This is the story of a young man whose life had so much promise, and Denzel deserved to live his life and witness a better Kenya. To begin this story, let me take you to June 2024. This was the time when Kenyans were protesting against the Finance Bill 2024. The plan was to march to Parliament, literally occupy it, to prevent MPs from voting in favor of the Finance Bill. The first major protests were on June 18th, and I remember there weren't so many people at Nairobi CBD protesting. There were a lot of people, but not as many as there were on the 25th. The next major protests were on Thursday, June 20th, and I remember this was the day when Rex Masai was shot. So by the time it got to Tuesday, June 25th, Kenyans were not only protesting the punitive taxes in the finance bill, but they were also protesting against police brutality towards protesters and justice for the victims of the brutality. And 23-year-old Denzel Omondi was among the Kenyans who showed up at Nairobi CBD to protest the finance bill on that day. Denzel at the time was a third-year quantity surveying student at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, or JKUAT, in Juja, and he was awaiting his exams. Now, I know Denzel was among the protesters because there's a video of him at Parliament grounds. I was not able to verify when the video was first posted online, but it shows Denzel holding the camera, and in the background, you can see that he was clearly at Parliament grounds with a crowd of people behind him. He had on the Kenyan flag around his neck, his glasses, a black mask to protect him from the tear gas, and in the video, people can be heard saying, "Hapa ni wapi, tuko ndani, Parliament," and those sorts of things. Look, I remember 25th of June 2024. I was at the protest in Nairobi CBD. I didn't get to Parliament, but I remember the terror I felt, but also the hope that was there. I remember hearing the gunshots, and I will never forget getting a gun pointed at me for the first time ever. Now, I did not get to Parliament, but I can understand the feeling in the reaction to actually being at Parliament grounds, like actually occupying Parliament, which was the plan. Now, after the protests, Denzel made it back to Juja in the evening. According to his friend, who was quoted by the Daily Nation, Denzel lived in a remote area of Juja in Oasis in a rented apartment. On Wednesday, 26th of June, he was seen at school with his friends. Now, according to his friends, he was in high spirits and he went about the day as normal as can be, right? So when Thursday, 27th June rolled around and he was MIA, they were concerned for his safety. According to one of his friends, the last time he spoke with Denzel was at around 10 a.m. on that Thursday when they had a call. He told the Daily Nation that Denzel did not sound distressed, he was still in high spirit, and they even planned to meet later that afternoon. About an hour after that call, Denzel's father, James Otieno, called him and they had a whole conversation about school, his studies, and everything in general. Parent-son conversation, you know? Now, being that Denzel was the firstborn, his father said that he had a lot of expectations for him and they had hope for a brighter future. Now, when they hung up that call, they had agreed to catch up later that day. But by 3 p.m. that day, Denzel was a no-show and his phone was also unreachable. Remember, he had planned to meet up with his friends and catch up with his dad, and now both of them could not reach him, which was generally unusual for him. Now, his friends immediately sprang into action. They went to his rented apartment in Oasis and searched for him, but he was nowhere to be found. His parents back at home were also worried. They contacted his friends and relatives in Nairobi, and none of them knew where he was. His friends started creating social media posters to alert people that he was missing. They shared the posters on WhatsApp groups, circulating his image and asking people for help to find him. I remember seeing some of the posts on Twitter, and at the time, like peak Maandamano era, there were a lot of missing posters being circulated because people were being abducted here and there. His friend who spoke to the Daily Nation said that he believed that Denzel was abducted from his apartment that Thursday. According to a different source, though, Denzel was apparently seen leaving his residence that Thursday on a mountain bike. So I cannot authoritatively say which of the two accounts is correct. On Saturday, 6th of July, that is around 10 days after his disappearance, his body was discovered dumped inside a water pool in an abandoned quarry in Juja, about 12 kilometers away from his apartment. That photo of Denzel in that quarry is one of those things that I will never forget. He was in all black, facing down in the water, with a backpack still on his back in the water. They were able to identify him because he had both his national ID and student ID in the backpack. There were also visible bruises on the back of his head and on his legs when he was found. His body was taken to General Cargo Funeral Home in Thika, and that was where his father went to identify him. They also recorded statements at Juja police station. The reports of his body being found broke on Sunday, July 7th, 2024, and almost immediately there was unrest among students at JKUAT. One thing that caught my attention was that the university apparently called for a meeting with the student leaders after he was found. According to one of the student leaders in the meeting, they were told to avoid speculation when it comes to Denzel's death. He told Nation, quotes, "We were told that his death was a suicide. He failed to graduate and was not on the passed list. He had 2 supplementary exams that he had not done and he was frustrated." Which is a weird statement because that sounds a lot like the same speculation they are asking them to avoid. His friends say that they were shocked to learn this information because according to their interactions with Denzel, he was not suicidal at all. If anything, he was very excited for the future. Also, that conclusion did not explain the bruises on the back of his head when he was found. In an article by his school's blog, JK USA Online, the bruises on the back of his head showed that there was foul play in his disappearance and murder. His postmortem report was released on July 9th, 2 days after he was found. It confirmed that Denzel died by drowning, which means that he was still breathing when he was thrown into the water. The autopsy also showed that he had several bruises on several parts of his body, including his knees and the back of his head. At the time when the autopsy report came out, that was the same time that the video of Denzel at Parliament went viral on social media. On the same day that the postmortem report was released, Amnesty International, which is a civil society organization, released a statement that was basically disputing the autopsy results. And it was also suggesting that his death was linked to the protests. This was also the sentiment of his family. They say that there was clear foul play in his death. The family lawyer told the media that Denzel was thrown into the water while he was unconscious, but still breathing, and he was left there to die. Now, despite efforts to stop JKUAT students from protesting, they took to the streets on July 12th demanding justice for Denzel's murder. They blocked part of Thika Road and they marched to Juja police station to demand action in his murder. A lot of blame also went to Safaricom because it was said that the company was helping police track and abduct people by sharing their information, specifically the information of their location. JKUAT students organized a candle lighting ceremony for Denzel on July 15th, where they remembered him for his advocacy and involvement with the students. Denzel was buried at his home on 22nd of July 2024, and his family eulogized him as a promising young man who had really high hopes for the future. There is still a lot of mysteries that surrounds Denzel Omondi's death until today, like how does a young man just disappear and turn up dead? One thing that still stays on my mind is, where did the suicide allegation come from, and why did the university feel like they needed to control the narrative of his death? And I hope that no matter how long it takes, Denzel gets justice for his death, because he deserved to live a full life. Thank you for sticking around until the end of this episode. You can support Krime KE podcast by sharing this episode with your friends so that we can get a larger community to listen to these cases. On TikTok and Instagram, we are at crime.ke. On Facebook, you can find me at Ajuma Millicent. I have tagged the podcast contact information and social media pages on the show notes of this episode so that it is easier for you to reach out if you have any feedback on this episode or the podcast in general. We also have a WhatsApp number, which I have put in the show notes of this episode. You can send in voice notes, suggest cases, and give feedback. Don't forget to give this podcast a 5-star rating on Spotify and catch the next episode of Krime KE podcast on Thursday next week in the same platform that you're listening from right now. But until then, stay safe and remember, it is crime with a K.